Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. I've been covering the protest in France, and because I want people in the US to see what's possible. Mainstream media, when they cover it, they either in some way smear the protesters, like how dare they protest because the retirement age is going to be increased. But I've been covering it heavily here, and I just want American people to see, look, they have over 1 million people out in the street in France. This has been going on for days, and they have different unions that have come together. The railroad workers have come together. Even the firefighters have decided to join in. Like, this is huge. Like, in France, they don't put up with this.
Yeah.
Like, but I feel like we are a lot more propagandized in this country. And honestly, I think people are distracted. There's more people that care about the Kardashians and Netflix and chill than they care about fighting for like a class issue in this country.
Yep. Yep. This is true. Yeah. Yeah. The French working class, good stuff. And others, I mean, they also have different laws. You know, like we've got this, it's so hard to form unions here, but I don't know the exact details, but my understanding is that you don't really need many people to sign union cards in a French workplace before you get the union. Like, I think that like a minority of workers can unionize a workplace. So the late Bob Fitch was explaining all this to me right before he died, but he had worked in the labor movement, and he was saying, until we get laws like France, it's hopeless. You know, it's like, it's not all about the culture. There's something different about the French. It's also the legal context empowers left institutions in a way that in this society, the legal context disempowers us. But yeah, it is heartening to look at the French. I remember when I was in graduate school in London, there was a lot of protests. I forget what they were about, but yeah, it was kind of eye-opening as an American, even someone coming from the left. But I think they were going to cut subsidies to the farmers in France. So they brought all their lambs to like the government palace and started cutting the throats of these lambs and throwing them on the steps. You know, it's like, and the British were totally horrified. And as an American, I was kind of, whoa, that's horrible. It's like, you know, the French, what do you think they do with the lambs anyway? You know, and the British were importing fish for the first time, and the French truckers would like stop their trucks and just open the trucks, hijack their trucks, open the trucks, dump all the fish out onto the highway, be like, we don't want this British fish. And it was like accepted. It's like, if you did that in the US, people would probably get shot by the police, you know? So there's that cultural, you know, culture of state repression and gunplay in this country that makes things a little different.
All right, Christian, I have 2 more questions for you. One, how do you feel about a general strike? We actually did a general strike summit about a year ago on RBN, and we were trying to advocate for the need why we need to have one. I look at you know, supply and demand. I also look at transportation, and I would say to have an effective general strike in this country, we would have to get the truckers on board, the railroad workers, and the port workers out on the West Coast. Because I feel like if you shut down transportation, then that will affect supplies, right? So if we had that unity among the truckers, and I feel like the Canadian truckers were on the right track with this when they had the protest. If you have the truckers, the railroad workers, and the port workers, I feel like that's your general strike. And you do so with a list of demands. And I feel like some of these demands that we had, like for progressive policies, if we were to implement that as a part of a general strike, maybe we could put pressure on those politicians in DC to pass some of these progressive policies. Like, I'm only seeing them pass on the state level. Like Massachusetts, some of these things have already passed.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense what you're saying, but it seems like there's a larger problem of building the class consciousness of regular people in this country to be okay with something like that. Because you could imagine if those unions, if the transportation sector went on a general strike that just shut down the economy, and other workers in other sectors of the economy weren't intellectually, politically on board for that and prepared and in solidarity, it could backfire, right? So it's like the strategy of what you're saying makes perfect sense, but it just seems to me like there's the deeper problem is building class consciousness, building unity. And I mean, the good news is we've got programs like yours and others that are doing that. So but I feel like we've got a long road to go. And I mean, that gets back to the COVID 180. And so there's got to be some recovery from that. I think the left has to deal with the fact that it made serious mistakes in supporting the lockdowns and being so uncritical of all of the pandemic responses. And then, you know, I think there's also, well, there's so much, you know, there's so many problems. I don't know. I'm not a great, you know, I'm not a scholar of social movements. I'm not a strategist, a great strategist. My activism, such as it has been, is, you know, really minimal these days, but it's always been as a foot soldier. I don't know what's the right thing to do, but I do really think that class consciousness and getting people to get out of their parochial little interests, and giving up on the cathartic dopamine hits and sadistic highs of canceling each other and fighting over this or that misphrasing of whatever, you know. I mean, that this whole kind of current subculture of the left is going to have to change if something like what you're describing is ever to be possible.